In the days of King Ahab, Israel had turned from God, bowing to Baal, a false god of rain and harvest. Darkness covered the land as the people's hearts grew cold. But then, a lone figure stepped forward, a prophet named Elijah. Clothed in rough garments, his eyes burned with unshakable faith. He marched into Ahab's palace, his voice thundering.
As the Lord lives, there will be neither dew nor rain, except at my word.
Then he turned and vanished, leaving the king in stunned silence. The heavens sealed, and drought gripped the land. But God led Elijah to a hidden brook, where ravens brought him food. The nation suffered, yet the prophet remained under the Lord's care, waiting for the day God would call him forth again. As the drought worsened, the brook dried up, and God sent Elijah to Zarephath, a town outside Israel. There, a poor widow gathered sticks for her last meal.
Bring me water,
Elijah called. As she turned, he added,
and a piece of bread.
The widow's face fell.
I have only a handful of flour and a little oil. After this meal, my son and I will die.
Elijah's voice was steady.
Do not be afraid. Make me a small loaf first. For the Lord says, the jar of flour will not run dry, and the oil will not be empty until the day he sends rain.
With trembling hands she obeyed. And just as God promised, her flour and oil never ran out. But one day, her son fell sick and died. The widow wept bitterly, but Elijah carried the boy to the upper room, stretched himself over him and cried,
Lord, let this child's life return to him.
At once, the boy gasped for air. Life returned. The widow, eyes wide with wonder, whispered,
Now I know you are a man of God, and his word is truth.
3 years passed and the land lay in ruin. Then God spoke.
Go to Ahab, for I will send rain.
Elijah returned, challenging Ahab and the prophets of Baal to a showdown on Mount Carmel. The people gathered as Elijah stood alone against 450 false prophets.
If Baal is God, follow him. But if the Lord is God, follow him.
He proposed a test. 2 altars, 2 sacrifices, one to Baal, one to God. The true God would answer by fire. Baal's prophets cried out, danced, and even cut themselves, but no fire fell. Then Elijah stepped forward. He rebuilt God's altar, drenched it with water, and prayed.
Lord, let it be known that you alone are God.
Instantly, fire blazed from heaven, consuming the sacrifice, stones, and even the water. The people fell to the ground, crying, The Lord, He is God. Elijah commanded them to seize the false prophets, and they were put to death. Then he turned to Ahab.
Go, for I hear the sound of heavy rain.
The rain poured, but Queen Jezebel vowed revenge.
By this time tomorrow Elijah will be dead.
Fear gripped the prophet, and he fled into the wilderness. Exhausted, he collapsed beneath a tree.
Lord, take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors.
But God sent an angel with food and water. Strengthened, Elijah journeyed 40 days to Mount Horeb. There, he hid in a cave. The Lord asked,
Why are you here, Elijah?
He poured out his heart, feeling alone. Then, God told him to stand outside. A mighty wind tore through the mountains, but God was not in the wind. Then came an earthquake. Still, God was not there. Next, a fire blazed, yet God was absent. Finally, a gentle whisper came, and Elijah covered his face. God spoke, not in power, but in stillness.
Go back, Elijah. I have preserved 7,000 in Israel who have not bowed to Baal.
Hope stirred in the prophet's heart. He was not alone. Years passed, and Elijah mentored Elisha, his faithful successor. One day, as they walked together, Elijah turned to him.
Ask what I shall do for you before I am taken.
Elisha replied.
Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit.
Elijah smiled.
You have asked a hard thing, but if you see me when I am taken, it will be yours.
Suddenly, a whirlwind formed, and a chariot of fire, drawn by blazing horses, descended from the heavens. In an instant, Elijah was lifted in a fiery whirlwind, vanishing into the sky. Elisha cried out,
My father, my father.
and tore his cloak in grief. But then, he saw Elijah's mantle lying on the ground. He picked it up, struck the Jordan River, and the waters parted, just as they had for Elijah. The spirit of the great prophet now rested upon Elisha, and God's work continued.